Hello and welcome to Portal Stormer. This is a video about forgiveness, especially if you're someone who has gone through complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I went through it with a mother who was an alcoholic and pretty much drank every day and was also a narcissist. I hate saying that because even though it's true, there were times where she was a great person. It was really interesting how other people would say who'd only seen a certain side of her, oh, your mum's great, she's this, and she was. And it's interesting, a couple of Wednesdays ago, actually it started the Tuesday night, I've been seeing tarot readings that were talking a lot about opening up your heart. Open up to love, which at the time seemed impossible because it was like I was already coming out of a retreat where I was on a path, just understanding everything that happened to me and stirring it up, and in the thick of it went through dealing with the darkness. I'm still going to be posting videos about that because it never goes away. But it's interesting, a couple of Tuesdays ago I came home and I wasn't my usual withdrawn self, come into my office and head down sort of thing. I made a really lovely meal for my husband. I felt really good placing it in front of him because he looked up at me with this face like a little boy appreciating having something nice. Now I do provide the meals, but sometimes it's heat and eat or takeaway, and going through all this stuff and stirring it all up, especially since January this year, I'd sort of just survived because I was still maintaining a full-time job, still am now, but I was going through it and stirring shit up and not being regular. And so placing that meal in front of him and seeing that smile on his face reminded me how good it feels to do something for people for no other reason other than to make them happy. And it's interesting because it was almost like an energy boost. I got an injection of a realization that this can be a good thing instead of operating out of anger, which in turn means bitterness and resentment. Thinking about tackling all those things using the fire was right and will be in certain circumstances, but constantly being a flamethrower, I thought something's got to give. So overnight, I went off and did the dishes too and felt really good about myself when I went to bed that night. And the Wednesday morning, it was so interesting. This is 2 Wednesdays ago. Today is the 24th of March 2025, but I woke up in the morning and the first image in my head was my mum and I when we went to a drag queen event when I was 19, so you're talking like 1985, in Melbourne in Australia, to a club that's called Lay Girls, or it was, I don't even know if it's still there, but I thought of the photo, Mum and I'm going to put it up here, sitting next to each other. At the time, in my mind, I remember thinking, here we go, I'm in another, being dragged along to another event where I have to pretty much end up babysitting my mother and all that. But in this instance, when that photo was in my mind when I woke up, I had this rush of love for her. And it's not like I ever stopped loving her, it's just natural. I loved her throughout my childhood in a variety of different ways. Sometimes hated her, but that's the interesting thing about love. The opposite to love isn't hate. They're like the two sides of the same coin. The opposite to love is indifference. And I thought about that as I was lying there in bed thinking about that image and how I'd felt at the time when we were sitting in that club. But it dawned on me, I thought, geez, how many times have other people said things about me? Now, having said that, I'm not sidestepping what happened to me, what she did to me. I'm still dealing with that. I understand it was... I understand, but I don't condone what happened to me. But as I was lying in bed thinking about all this, and I would like the opportunity to apologise and to be forgiven, for any trespasses throughout my life. And I thought of her and her life and everything she'd gone through. Not one bit did it excuse what she did, not just to me, but to my brothers and others in the family. But it was just thinking of myself too, and like, what would I like? The opportunity to apologize. Now, my mother never apologized for what she put us through. Even on her deathbed, the closest she came to that was, I wish things could have turned out better. Stuff like that. So the narcissist can never apologize, especially even if they mean it. There's just something about the ego stopping it. But lying there in bed, thinking about her, opening up my heart, thinking about her and remembering, because I'd only been thinking the last few months and even the last few years, I could say, whenever I thought of her, it was always the bad times, the times she left us without food and just went on walkabout, disappeared. The times where she left us staying in places that were quite dangerous for us. The way that she would play mind games with us, and the way she'd ridicule us, and all the other things. I thought about that, but also realised, why am I only cherry picking all the bad things? It's the same thing with depression. You're choosing to focus on the negative, and that's just very, like I'm trying to make a blanket statement. Depression has so many different layers, and I've talked about that in another video. But thinking about Mum, I remembered that morning lying in bed, the positive things, the fun times when we would just sit there and laugh our guts out over silly things. She had a great sense of humour. She could make the funniest faces, and we'd do it with each other. We'd riff off each other. There were times where we'd spend our Sundays for a couple of years there, in the early 2000s when I was back in Australia. We would have a ritual every Sunday. I'd turn up early, like 6 a.m. on a Sunday, and we would just lie on the couch and watch movies, TV shows, laughing and enjoying each other's company. The good thing about those days was there was no alcohol involved, but when it was around lunchtime, I could hear the crack of the can in the kitchen, I realised there's my cue. Because with Mum, sometimes it was just the first sip and she would go straight back into it like she was drunk all along. And I remember a doctor saying to me once, even a glass of water in the morning for someone who's constantly drinking, a glass of water can make the body feel like, oh, here we go again, and start acting drunk. And she often would seem drunk in the morning, and you knew that she'd only had a cup of tea or a glass of water. But thinking of all those things, the positive sides of things, that lifted me up, and I did a meditation in bed thinking, okay, I'm enjoying this open heart thing, and this might sound silly to people who are normally open-hearted. It's not like I'm not a compassionate person. Over the years, I've bent over backwards, given my shirt, whatever, to people, sometimes to a fault, like I will give it all away and then think, shit, what did I do that for? I really valued that thing. But for some reason, it was appeasing, the person, therefore, by proxy, my mother. When you don't resolve that shit, it's amazing how the patterns keep echoing through your life. But I carried that energy day after day at work, thinking, instead of blocking people, shutting them out, getting angry, thinking, oh, here comes that client again, or whatever. I just stopped reacting in that way and stopped preparing for contingencies that might never eventuate. And I found the more I opened up, the more I approached each person and everything and the way I thought with things in a more open way, instead of that usual cascading thing I do was, first this is going to happen and then that, and now I'm going to have to do this, talking myself into a situation that might never occur. It came out of thin air. So using that open-hearted energy, talking with people that way and opening up, and same with my husband, because I tend to talk myself into a tiz and he's not even involved. I'm thinking, first I'm going to do this and then he'll say that and blah, blah, blah. it's amazing. It's not just the negative self-talk that I'm dealing with. I'm doing a lot better with, but it's also the spiraling that, like the future projections that will never happen, the anxiety over things that aren't happening. And I put it to the test all week again. Last week I was open-hearted. Yes, I had a few dips, but it was interesting how I was able to just get back up on the raft. Okay, that was just a split second. But at home too, on Saturday, rather than shooting myself to death, I've got to do this with the house, I've got to do that, I've got to do that load of washing, whatever. I said to my husband, you know what, I just feel really creative today. And it's not something I would normally say. Normally I would say, well, first I've got to do blah, 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 and then I might get a chance to do. It's almost setting the stage, and then of course he would respond accordingly. So I wrote the script and handed it to him. This way I was the opposite. I did what I've wanted to say occasionally when I want to spend the day just creating, whether it be writing or doing video or what have you. And his response was wonderful. He was sitting in his chair in his office, and he just looked up at me and he said, "Do great work. Why don't you do you boo-boo," like he says sometimes. And I just felt this warmth and this rush of love for him, but also feeling that rush of love come back to me. It dawned on me the opening of the heart and even forgiveness, and I feel like I'm doing it in my own way with Mum. It allowed me to completely step out of that dark pit that I've been in. When you don't forgive, you stay in the darkness. You're stewing in it. You're marinating in it. And I've always had a negative attitude towards forgiveness. My attitude is only if the other person deserves it. I can be very judgmental and harsh and sharp, but when I recognized that forgiving her flowed on to forgive myself, it was weird how that was attached. And I'd heard all throughout my life, whether I was watching a documentary or whatever, stories about forgiveness, where people just looked so grateful that they'd finally stepped over that threshold and forgiven the perpetrator or whoever. At the time, watching those stories, thinking, I just don't understand it. They don't deserve it. They were heinous what they did. They abused the child. They hurt the woman. They killed. They whatever. But what I noticed, and some people said it point blank, I'm doing this for me. I'm not doing it for them. And I never understood that. I thought, how could you be satisfied with forgiveness when it's a one-way street? It just didn't click. And what I realized a couple of weeks ago when I started thinking about my mum, not with that hateful hat on, but with the loving hat on, if you want to put it that way. Well, I did. But anyway, sorry, I'm mental. When you do that, you well, first of all, the dark hat, you're blocking it. You know what? When I forgave her, it wasn't condoning what she did. It wasn't forgetting what she did. I recognized that she was just a human being, you know. And that's, at this point, I'd like to go in and talk about her upbringing, because when I was talking to my therapist through BetterHelp about it, she was quite amazed at the story and said to me, I can understand how your mum evolved to be the way she was, having the problems she had. I've heard stories like whether narcissists, is it nature or nurture? And a lot of people say they're born that way, they're evil, whatever. I don't know. I think it's a combination of things. It's an accumulation of events, and it does depend on your own personal makeup. My mum was a Scorpio. She was actually born in the year of the dog, and her element was fire. So to me that's interesting because I'm the fire horse, born in 66. She was born in 46. So you could say that, but also highly sensitive. When I was looking at her numerology again just recently, I was thinking, I forgot she had the arrow of hypersensitivity. So it kind of, my mum was turbo and intense, and everything was like the utmost of importance or the worst thing that could ever happen. It was always turbo and intense, which is where I think I learned, because I had to build up and match her intensity in order to satisfy or her whatever. But when she was born into a family, like a large family. On my mum's side, my grandmother was Aboriginal, and my grandfather was Chinese. Some people say that my grandmother had a bit of Indian in her too, and you could sort of see that in Mum. My mum was a very attractive woman, especially when she was younger. That's what we all say, don't we, about people being more attractive when they're younger, but she really was, and you would have been able to mistake her for someone from India. But then obviously Aboriginal as well, and definitely the touch of Chinese. But she was born into this family in Wangaratta, sort of like in the outback almost, in the country area in Australia, in Victoria. And she was, I think, the third youngest. If I remember, my grandmother died giving birth to the final two children. They were twins. Apparently one twin didn't survive. My family, when they get drunk and gather together, they argue about the facts, but that's the constants, the constant info that I heard growing up. And my grandfather, Eric, was an alcoholic, and some family members say he died because the alcohol dislodged some shrapnel in his head that he got in the Second World War. He was a chef or a cook on the boats, and I don't know how they met, my grandmother, and my grandmother's name was Nona. My grandmother was actually, before she got married and had kids, was a travelling entertainer. She was a dancer, and sometimes, of course, being darker, she might have to be in the background. That's how they did back then. But she would also adopt the male role, and was apparently known quite with this dancing troupe travelling around Australia before she settled down, if you could call it that, and started having the children. There was 13 in total, my mum being the third youngest. And the thing is, when my mum was about 4 or 5, my grandmother died giving birth to the twins. I think it was 5, something like that, 5 or 6 maybe. And my grandfather was in no condition to take care of the kids, so some of the kids went to stay with the oldest children, who only had X amount of space for the kids. But then Mum and the 2 younger children, I think that's how it was told to me, went to stay in this home. It was called the Kildonan home. It was for children, orphans, I think. But anyway, it wasn't long before the 2 youngest finally were able to go and stay with one of the older sisters, and Mum was left behind in the home on her own. And from that age right up until 16, she was in the home. And the stories she told me, she never told me about SA or those kind of abuses, but she did tell me that when white families were coming to look for children to adopt, they would make her hide in the closet so that they wouldn't see her. She didn't tell me a lot about those stories, but sometimes they would sneak out, and she remembers going into the food cupboard because they were starving and they were eating jelly crystals with their hands. But she was able to occasionally go out. She was not so much adopted, but taken for weekends and special holidays and things by my auntie Doris, who lived near the seaside as well as in the country. And she was like a relative my whole life. But for Mum, it was probably the only time she ever got to go out and live a normal life outside of the home. And of course, when she hit 16, she and she always told me that she resented her family for leaving her there, coming to get the two youngest, and I can understand that. I mean, just imagine that, a child from around 5-6 years of age until 16, spending those formative years in an institution. God knows what happened to her. But when she came out at 16, she was, they called it billeted. She was billeted out to a family who helped take care of her while she went to secretarial school. And once she finished going through school, of course, she started partying and going out. But apparently she never drank alcohol, even when she met my father. My grandmother told me, the first time I met your mother, when he brought her home, she had a glass of lemonade, and that lasted her all night. It wasn't until later that she started drinking, which is interesting. But my dad was he was a twin, and he and my uncle were known in the Box Hill area in Victoria, Australia, Learising around in their cars, FJ Holdens. My mum said how she met Dad was that she had just gone to the cinema and was walking with a friend away from the cinema, and he and my uncle and some other guys in the car apparently yelled out the window, "Hello, Sorty, feeling naughty?" And then they started going out. And I was born when Mum was 19. She was turning 20 later that year. And when they got married, she was actually 6 months pregnant with me. So I don't think it wasn't long after they met that she got pregnant with me and they got married. Now, my grandmother on my dad's side, white, with French and Welsh in the background. On my grandfather it was Welsh, on my grandmother's it was French. She was like a closet racist. She would never say anything out loud, but you know what closet racists are like. They'll just peel it off here and there and just tell you a little bit of this and that, but it'll be shrouded in something. So I'm not being racist or anything, but later on, after they divorced, all of a sudden the claws came out, and my grandmother, my nana, would talking about her like she's a tart and stuff like that, the words they chose. But anyway, Mum, of course, went on to, after having me, then she had the next brother, Lucas, and then my other brother 2 years later, Peter. We were 2 years apart, all of us. Some people, actually my Auntie Doris told me years and years later that Peter actually had a different father, that Mum had cheated on Dad with a Greek guy who worked at the local fish and chip shop. And it kind of answered some questions in terms of how Mum she spoiled Peter to death. He got whatever he wanted. He was a crybaby, very much. But then again, at that time, when she split from Dad, all of us 3 kids went to live with Dad at my Nana and Pa's place. At the same time, my cousin Georgia was there, her father, who was the twin of my dad. She was there too because he'd split up with his wife. So there was all us kids there, the 2 sons and Nana and Pa. And from that point on, I didn't see Mum much, just here and there. And of course, I idolised her. I wanted my mum. I missed my mum, and so did my brother. The sad thing is, years later in 1997, he passed away from a heroin overdose that night in Melbourne. It was 97, that's right. That was an interesting year. When I say interesting, that's bad. That's not a good word. But I had a miscarriage. My boyfriend, in the same 2 months, my boyfriend's sister committed suicide. My brother died of the heroin overdose. My uncle walked into a dam and drowned himself over depression. Also, there was a lot of farming problems happening. I think it was foot and mouth disease with the sheep and cows and stuff or whatever. But Mum, going back to the forgiveness and everything, I'm waffling on about the stories, but Mum went through a lot of hardships in the start of her life anyway, so that stage was set. When she came out and met Dad, and then of course she was just learning about the world, and then she has the kids, but she's going out, and someone had reported to my nana they saw her on the back of a motorcycle of some guy, having the time of her life. I think oftentimes when Mum was lashing out like that, running away, going on walkabout, it was probably trying to find herself. And that's not excusing her behaviour, because she had kids, and the bottom line is, you got kids, you stow that shit or put it to the side. But when you've been through so much and then never felt special because you were the one left behind. So I can understand whether this is how her narcissism came out, because some people did say to me, geez, when your mum was a toddler, she would pout, and if no one paid attention to her, she'd put her bonnet on, her Easter bonnet, and do these dances, and if no one paid attention, she'd pounce. And I've got a picture I'm going to share with her doing that, pouting. But maybe she knew what was coming. Being in that home all that time, being left alone, not being thought of as special, put into the cupboard when the white people come to adopt the children. I can understand what that could do to your psyche. Feeling like you're never good enough, no one wants you, even your family doesn't want you. I'm trying not to get emotional, because when I think about what I went through, it was horrible what she did to us, but it was just as horrible what she went through. I can't even think of all those years. You're talking 10, 11 years maybe, feeling like no one wanted you. Your family left you there, your mother and father died, and when you come out, you're with this white family telling you how to be a normal person. You get married, you have kids, because it's like, well, this is going to help me escape. And then you realise, no, this doesn't answer my soul's need. And constantly out there trying to find it. When she started drinking, my dad told me it was a time where there was a big family reunion, or someone was getting married, I'm not sure. But he said when she came back, she was a different person. It was the first time she'd gotten drunk. It was one of my aunties who got her drunk. They're all pretty much all alcoholics, or the ones who think they aren't. They're closet drinkers, or they are, but they pretend that they're normal. But you know what it's like with alcoholics. But I've sort of lost my trail. But having gone through all that, and then pushing and going out there, and the drink, I'm sure, was giving her the Dutch courage that she needed. Now when I'm drunk, because you know what it's like, when you drink, your inhibitions go away, and then the real you comes out. But often I think that the real you, the monster, was the rage. How dare you leave me behind? And it didn't matter who was in the room when she was raging, especially when it was alcohol. It was anybody would get it, whoever was in her way, kind of thing. And I didn't understand that then, even though I knew the stories and she told us the stories as we were growing up. I didn't put two and two together, but as an adult and looking back, especially with love, and especially regardless as to how other people would say, I wouldn't forgive her, because some things she did were really bad. Never sexually abused, was the actual opposite. If anybody did, she'd be the one coming in there hammer and tong, I'm ready to deal with them. But the mind games, the lack of awareness when it came to how she when she talked to us a certain way, dealt with us a certain way, made us do things that made us look ridiculous, but it amused her. That it was really like that control. Like, she would always say things like, you know, you're lucky that you have what you have, I never had that. See, I'm so emotional thinking about her. I'm sort of losing track, but just knowing that everything that she went through, as much as it's not an excuse for what she did to us, but it is a reason. It does explain And I have to ask myself, especially when it comes to the forgiveness, what am I expecting if I don't forgive? What was I getting for not forgiving? I wasn't getting anything. I was in that turbo cycle constantly. You know what? She did this. That's right. She did that. And that's what we all do when we're dealing with crap that happened to us. But what I found was really important was just pushing that button that said stop, because no matter how many other things I can unearth looking back through my journals, and I'm going to share some pages of my journal when I was 12, and there was a lot of hateful stuff, but it reflected what was going on at the time. It just reminds me, forgiveness, it really, it's that open door that you assume doesn't exist. That's how it feels to me. It's not condoning what they did. When I forgave her and thought, shit, okay, you did all that, but you had all that. And if nothing else, you're a human being. But slowing down and actually focusing on the things that I wish she could have focused on when it came to how she affected me, might have made a difference. But I wanted to share also some fun things about her, because she was the type of person who could light up a room. She would walk in, especially if she was drunk. Oh my God. There were times when she was drunk, it depended on what she drank. If she was drinking spirits, it was watch out. If it was port or anything dark, anything like fortified wine or scotch or bourbon, watch out. But you could catch her at a certain point where she'd only been 2 or 3 drinks in, where between maybe the 6th drink, in that little, she could be so entertaining and hilarious. She would get up and dance, and she would do this mouth thing, oh my God, like they do, especially in 70s style. I can't explain it, that jazz kind of dancing, and she would do this thing with her mouth. She'd go as she was dancing, and we would be pissing ourselves laughing, us kids. Sometimes she would be really childish, and she'd come in with her hands like this and help me, and we would just laugh and go along with it. So those drunken episodes would be fine, but when she would switch, especially if she mixed her drinks, then there'd be this darkness, and she'd be honed in on you, and come here, I got a bone to pick with you, and you'd be, oh fuck, here we go. But I wonder, at those times when she was, channeling, it was like, that's right, I remember that shit I went through. No one cares about me, blah, blah, blah. I can understand her, because I go in those cascading downward spirals, whatever you call them. I'm still healing the inner child, because there's still that pain, those times when she would do things and I would say things to me, or do things to me and make me feel like, okay, I'm nothing. Or she'd look at a gift I'd give her as if big deal. It really hurt me. Or when she was, putting me in a difficult situation with other people, calling out that I had my period, that I was a dirty bitch, that this and that. It hurt me, but it's amazing. I can smile about it. I can't explain it. All those things that I was gnashing my teeth against and crying about and angry about, and you know what, you don't deserve me, whatever. That all felt at the time self-serving, but it's amazing. I understand now it was self-degrading. I might have needed to gnash my teeth and vent for a while, but to do that for years and years and years without the forgiveness, when that door opened up for me and I stepped through and looked at her through that love, that eye of love, that lens of love, no matter what happened, that was then, this is now. It was like stepping over a threshold. And now when I think about all the things that happened, including the way I paid it forward, because you pay it forward. I know with my son doing certain things and saying certain things, although I always made sure I was never drunk. I never really drank anyway, that he, always had a roof over his head right up until we moved out. But I didn't put him through that shit, but I know I put him through other shit. I was very, very strong about don't do this, don't do that kind of thing to make sure he didn't grow up like me. I think I passed over to him that intensity which runs in our family on mum's side. I know with my brother, he has it, this real turbo, and people look at you and think that you're about to murder them, but you're just wondering what you're going to have for lunch. I don't know what it is, this resting bitch face thing. But I think constantly having to be angry and ready just in case she did attack is what made me adopt that face and that mode of thinking. But now that I've crossed over and I've opened up my heart, and I hate saying opened up my heart, it sounds like such a wuss. I mean, but no, it's amazing how opening up my heart has become a strength, because I'm not hanging my hat on all that negative crap that was dragging me down. I know that it happened, I see it where it is, and I will continue talking about it and sharing my insights and other parts of my life, because we've got some fantastic stories in my family which I will share. And I realized I was holding back all that good stuff by being so hateful and bitter and resentful, especially towards other people who stood by and let it happen. Let's face it, other people who said to me, what doesn't kill you will make you stronger, and don't worry, she's showing you how not to be. Now that I'm on the other side, it's like shrugging and going, I don't want to care anymore about that stuff. I don't want to go back to that shit show, to that horror movie. The idea of, like I've said before about depression, it's sort of, I don't want to go back there. I used to think of it as some gothic, romantic, wonderful thing. It's not. Being depressed is yuck. And I've been depressed my whole life. And it's interesting because since I've opened up my heart, those dips don't go as deep as they used to. The dips are like little potholes in the road. And getting back up to that open heart feeling, which is so ironic because in my family, heart issues do run in the family, heart conditions. And I'll tell you a funny story. It's not that funny, I suppose, but one of my aunties, Auntie Judy, had to have open heart surgery. And she was in the hospital on the bed, and they pulled the sheet over her head because they thought she'd passed away. But she was trapped and she couldn't move in her body, but she could hear them talking, time of death, blah, blah, blah. And she thought, oh my God, they're going to incinerate me. She was freaking out thinking, I'm not dead, I'm not dead. And she was trying to scream. Luckily, one of the doctors saw her toe move just slightly. It sort of twitched and she was saved. But my mum was taken to hospital once for her heart, but she was smoking a lot, like 40 a day, and drinking and stuff. But another uncle had heart problems, so I've always worried about that. But it's interesting that since I've been opening up my heart, it just dawned on me as I was speaking here, heart issues, but I'm getting a bit metaphysical here. But anyway, forgiveness, you'll know when you're ready to forgive, and some things are hard to forgive. I am still, to this day, I will continue to be grateful that I was never SA'd and that I wasn't beaten up, not, we got hit but not beaten. That might sound like I'm making excuses, but it's amazing how psychological abuse and mind games can be just as deep and hurtful, especially if you're someone like me who's a highly sensitive person, and obviously Mum was too. So what I do regret, because she did pass away in 2023, is that we never had a chance to talk like this, like I am with you or to the ether. We never had a chance for me to say, Mum, you did all that, but you know what? This is where I am. I hear you and I see you, the story. I don't think anybody really, I don't think she felt like she was ever heard when it came to what she went through in that home, in that children's home, being pretty much left to her own devices by her family and feeling like she wasn't wanted. That in itself, that 10 years of living in an institution, in a white institution, from say, from right through the 50s to the early 60s. So you can imagine. But she did some amazing things. My mum in the 1980s was chosen to represent the Indigenous Aboriginal women in Australia at this International Women's Conference that was held in Nairobi. She was very proud of that. I was very proud of her, and she really got the bug, the jet set bug. But once she went over there and met with other women and learned handicrafts, they shared their stories, everybody was talking. It was a really great symposium, I think that's what it was. But she'd pave the way, she would help people and do things that other people might not, to the point where people would call her the Queen of Hearts, which kind of always upset me, because I'm thinking, what, charity begins in the home, how's that? But when I look at her as a person outside of the alcoholism, even the narcissism, because she wasn't always narcissistic, she was a lot of the times, especially when she was drunk, it really came out. But is narcissism just a term? I mean, it wasn't all self-love, it was projecting, it was anger, it was rage about what she went through, not excusing her again, just saying that's what was probably happening. And that's what makes it easier for me to continue forgiving her and heal myself. I feel it. It's in my heart. It's the way I'm dealing with people. I'm floating above the things that I normally would allow myself to nosedive into. Let's get into that. Yeah, I'm feeling like someone needs some retribution. I'm going to do this. No, I'm in this, you might say, a bubble, but I'm loving it because it's saving me from the depths. It's saving me from that deep darkness that I used as a weapon, like a scorpion tail myself. Even though I'm Virgo, I do have a Scorpio South Node, and my mum was Scorpio. And it's taken the sting out of my tail, and I don't feel less powerful. I actually feel very empowered, because when you have just shrugged it off and said, you know what, this is a new day, it's a new life, I'm going to approach everything through the lens of love, and of course dredge up what I need to if the time happens, because not everything's going to be hunky-dory. There's going to be some people and some times where I might have to use the fire, and it's there, it's ready, I'm happy to use it. I mean, I feel so weird that I could easily flip either way. Lots of love, but okay, you're coming at me with a pitchfork, I have to defend myself, let me bring out this fire. That empowers me, the idea that I could go nuts or could do a deep dive, but I choose not to. And that's power. Not allowing myself to dwell in the darkness, to marinate in the bitterness and the resentment, get snarky and bitchy, enjoy gossiping and telling horrible stories, sharing things with people, and they deserve everything they get. Excuse me, I'm done with that. I've sidestepped it, and I'm so happy I have. And I know whoever's watching there, forgiveness, you got to arrive at that point. So I'm not saying, oh, look, I achieved this, you can too. You're on your own journey. But I wanted to share this to show that as much as I am still dealing with the darkness, having a handle on it and using it from that place of love is making all the difference. And I know people have said that in the past before. I've heard it, and it's just right over your head. It's like Lego blocks. When it clicks, it clicks. So I know I've waffled about a bit, and I've shared some about my family, and I'm going to continue doing that. But I want to put this out there just to show, take it from me, someone who thought forgiveness was disgusting, forgiveness was weakness, has turned a corner and realized forgiveness is freedom. It doesn't have to be a two-way street. It doesn't have to flow on, even though I keep seeing that infinity symbol. Good, bad, or ugly, that energy flows. So when I'm thinking about her and forgiving her and just saying, you know what, Mum, I love you, and I really see you, and I hear your story, I'm going to share your story. And in doing so, I'll be sharing my story too. And therefore, hopefully breaking that generational curse, letting it flow on no matter who wants to pick it up where I leave off. I just enjoy the feeling of peace. I'm not used to it, and I'm keeping this flowing for some reason because I feel like I need to. But what I want to say is, please, if nothing else, think about this. Consider how forgiveness doesn't mean telling them it's okay, what you did was right, I was wrong. That's not what it's about. It's saying, I'm not going to carry this with me anymore. I'm not taking it with me. I'm not using it to punish others and myself. I want to live a free life. I want to be able to forge a path that doesn't involve warfare. So I'm going to leave it there. If you liked this, if you think I've got something to share, please subscribe, or at least like the video, and take care of yourself. We all know it's a horrible world out there, but keep that good energy flowing.